Randy Bennett is a real audience member. She asked, and I think it's a good question, aren't we asking too much of consumers if we shift all control to users? My mom has zero clue what we do with data or what it means. Miles, what's your take? I mean, consumers really can handle all the power.
Well, I look, when Facebook allowed me to put posts out that were only going to my friends, I jumped on it. I didn't want everybody. But, I want to think of, we think about data, and I'm coming back to Michelle's point. Think about the app, and I've been trying to buy one, but you can't get them until this crisis is over. The temperature thing, where they, with privacy protected, that's the first thing they do. They aggregate the data and then present that for public good. And they've been able to predict where COVID hotspots are. And so look what can happen if we can trust the privacy to help the social good. Because I don't have a problem if anonymized aggregate data is being used to predict that I'm in a hotspot and something needs to happen because it's going to help my neighbor. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things, but I don't want to be identified as one of the people who potentially has COVID. I want to deal with that myself.
Right. But it helps other people, though. If you give up that information, it helps the common good.
Well, it can't be the common good versus privacy.
Right.
That's the whole dated zero-sum model of, sorry, we can't do privacy because we got to protect public health interest, or a terrorist incident. We have to forget about privacy because there's terrorism. You have to address both. With the existing public, the whole COVID thing, you can easily do both. Apple, Google partnered together to develop, it's commonly called a contact tracing app. It's not contact tracing. They called it exposure notification, so that you could be notified if you're exposed to COVID. And Apple briefed me on this on 2 separate occasions, because I always want to look under the hood. I always say trust but verify. And there's no personal information captured whatsoever. No identity information, no geolocation data, nothing. It has totally protected your information, and it's your choice if you want to download the app and be notified if you've been exposed to someone who is within 6 feet of you somewhere and they're COVID-19 positive. And then you decide how to proceed. You can do both. You have to do both. You cannot give up privacy because of COVID. And in fact, 300 leading academics and epidemiologists in 26 countries wrote an open letter to governments saying, if you design contact tracing without privacy embedded in it, you're going to fail. It's not going to work. These are 300 brilliant epidemiologists saying this. So let's get with the program and get rid of this zero-sum either or win-lose model. It is so yesterday. We have to do both.
Well, I get your point, to be sure. What about companies that they architect, these business capabilities for their customers that link data between systems, which seems like it might be a headache right there. What needs to ensure that the data protection between the systems, where it can fall between the cracks? Michelle, an answer to that?
I think Michelle, where are you, Michelle?
Did she drop off? Or she hasn't been connected. I'm sorry to lose her. Maybe she'll log back in.
Oh, I'm sure she'll come back in.
She will. All right.
So Anne, you go.
Yeah, did you understand that my fractured version of that question?
Would you repeat it, please?
Please. Yeah. So companies they're architecting business capabilities for their customers, and that link data between systems. What can they do to ensure that the data protection as they try to create these link systems?
Well, first of all, the links between the systems, the customers have to be aware that they're doing this. So you have to provide notice. If you want to share my personal information with another company and I'm not aware of it, I don't want you to do it. Now, you may have very good reasons for doing so, and if you let me know, that's no problem. But this can't be done behind the scenes and engaged in, because what happens is, if you do that and you're connecting information in an identifiable way and there's a data breach, that's it. You're going to fall. These days, when there are data breaches, they're not just lawsuits, they're class action lawsuits that arise. People have had it with having their information accessed in these ways that they have not consented to. They haven't even been provided notice. So at the very least, you can do that. Or you can de-identify the data in terms of stripping personal identifiers from the data. You can substitute something that enables you to connect, but it's not identifiable, like you're not going to know it's Ann Kavukin's data or someone else. There are a number of things you can do. And there are so many protections you can build in that it's on you, the company, to do, not put on the consumer. The recent, you may not be aware of it, the CRA issue here in Canada, Canada Revenue Agency, had a breach. And I think 6,000 people's data were accessed by hackers, etc. And the thing was, it's not, the CRA blamed citizens, individuals. Well, they didn't have strong enough passwords or this or that. Well, with due respect, you should have embedded stronger privacy protective secure measures. Use two-factor authentication. Use a company like Cloak.ai, that can offer very strong protections. It's up to you as the company or government agency to offer the strongest protections possible. You can't put this on individuals.
Well, let's look to sort of the people that are running the infrastructure, the CIOs out there. You know, obviously data governance is critical to them. Maybe they may or may not be falling down on the job in that regard. What piece of advice would you give to CIOs listening that want to do a better job of handling, you know, privacy? Miles, your advice on that?
Yeah, I think you start by determining what data you're collecting and asking yourself the question, why do I need that piece of identifiable information? What pieces of information I'm collecting could identify a person? You know, if you add them all together, it gives you, I mean, there's a set of identifiers for HIPAA. I think it's 21, if I remember, identifiers. What are those things that we think will identify? And then ask yourself, why does this piece of information flow between this system and that system? Is it essential? Is it not essential? So start asking that. And then when you build your marketing engines and things like that, start asking, okay, which of these pieces can be seen by which person? Do I hide some of the information from some people? Do I not allow them to see it? Or how do we do that? I mean, because, you know, if you look at GDPR, it says a German person can't see a French customer's information. So how do you have to start with architecture. And enterprise architects, I know that there's a lot of work going on in Open Group, for example, on this. Enterprise architects are key to thinking about where does data flow, how does it flow, and then how do I build an architecture that's going to protect data. If I do that, then if they break in, they're not going to get very much.
Yes.
And so design for it, and guess what? The consequences of a break-in become much less, because no one person, and that's the other thing, you can't have, when you design this, you can't have a DBA with all of the passwords for everything. So you have to start to be smart about these things. And CIOs are starting to really think about, how do you do this right?
Yeah, I think we have to look at, there's CIOs and there's CIOs. There are CIOs who are technical experts, and they're keeping the lights on, and they're doing plumbing, and it's really hard work, and hurrah. There are CIOs that are truly chief information officers, and they do have security and privacy as equal a functional specification to, are the lights on? Is the email running? Do we have cameras working in the offices? So sometimes it's a dispositional thing. And I'll bring it back to the question that Brandy asked earlier. Isn't it too much to have the user doing everything? Answer, yes. We have to think about this as a systems engineering process. Just like you think, can I just eat carrots and have a healthy body? No. Can I do intermittent fasting and not eat food when I'm not intermittently fasting? No, you will die. You will die. And so if you look at everything as, I can use encryption, I can use anonymization, I can use dual factor authentication. If you look at each one of these as some sort of silver panacea bullet, you will fail. If instead you invite your users to the table, and this is where this ownership question gets tricky, is, so my background before privacy in last century was in intellectual property law. Thinking about the bounds of what is a creative notion, us together in this webinar, we're sharing our personal stories, our faces, our voices, our biometrics, our experience, but we're also individual people. There's never a time when Anne and I are not married in this hour, and Miles and James and I are not married in this hour. So you have to think about this as is almost like back to Mr. Ritter, quantum privacy, really thinking down to the data element in context over time. And so the smart money on privacy tech is really thinking about privacy operations. So thinking about not just buying a collection of privacy enhancing technologies, but where do they sit in your type of business? And this is why I say solving for Facebook and Google is a very important thing for human rights. Full stop. Solving for how do I get my dry cleaning delivered during a pandemic at my home using my credit card or my debit card if I don't have credit, that is a equally crucial systemic problem. So we have to have solutions for systems. We have to know when those systems are working properly, and that comes back to my board membership. I don't want a board member to say, are you using encryption? Because, oh my God, did you hear about? No, that's not your role on the board. That's like them asking you what the percentage is on a real estate mortgage that you have for your office building. You don't want your board asking you. What you do want your board asking with is, what is the most critical information that this organization uses? Back to Miles's point of, you can't really architect until you know what you're architecting for. Am I building a little bridge that goes over a 2-foot stream, or am I building the Golden Gate Bridge over very treacherous waters? How you get that done fundamentally is changed by what we call our privacy blueprint. John Berard helped me come up with that term. It's before architecture, it's before design. Are you building a kiddie pool or an Olympic-sized swimming pool? Then you figure out, what are the materials? Who are the types of people who are best disposed to respect this information, and what level is it at? I've been working with companies that are doing unprecedentedly huge COVID clinical trials for drugs. Normally we're talking sample sizes of 100 or maybe 10,000 for a big trial. We've got trials going on right now in the world of 100,000 people. That is unprecedented.
Yes.
These are people in dire circumstances.
Yeah.
So we have to get it right. To build that system is, to me, as crucial as figuring out what do we want our political information stream to look like on Facebook. So identifying your risks, identifying what is your data, and then from a board level perspective, strategically, are you measuring activity and compliance busy work, percentage of people filling out your little questionnaires about privacy? Or are you saying, what is the result? Can Brandy come in as a customer and have a solid understanding of the information transaction she's being asked to participate in? Can she actively participate in it? Do we have the tools to do that? And once she does, do we respect her choices? And at the end of all of that, and at the end of it, not the beginning, does it still make sense for us economically and sustainably to offer that type of service? Because if you can't hold it up, then don't do it. It's a one-night stand, not a marriage.
And I want to give you a chance to answer that same question about the CIOs, and we won't delve too deeply into that issue. But what advice would you give to CIOs, people who really architecting the infrastructure in terms of making the consumers have privacy? What's your best advice to CIOs?
And I agree with everything that Michelle said. So she's amazing. I sit on a number of boards, and I often work directly with CIOs. And the first thing I try to understand is exactly what they need to deliver. Because sometimes you have to talk, once I get an understanding of that, then I talk to the CEO and say, your expectations of your CIO are unreasonable. They put the CIO in a position where they have no choice but not to protect people's privacy, because you're asking them to make all these connections, which they can't do in a privacy protective manner. So I think a big part of it, CIO has to have the ear of someone who understands privacy and can communicate that to the CEO in terms of the expectations made on the CIO. After that, I talk about what information they have in place. And I ask them, do you have a data map? Do you know how to navigate the flow of personal information that comes into your company or organization? Because you may have the necessary consent at the first instance where data are collected from individuals and everything is consented to, it's fine. But then after that, if the data flows throughout your company in a way that is not privacy protective, and there are many third parties and secondary uses of the data that were not consented to, then that's a huge problem. So I always ask them to map the flow of data within their company, creating a data map. Very few CIOs that I know have done that, and they have appreciated the idea of doing it so they can get a real grasp of what's happening. And then at each instance, make determinations as to whether additional consent is required, how deep does it go, can you do it in a de-identified manner? These are some of the things that I review with them. So I'm not just putting the blame on CIOs, they have to be given support by their CEO if they want to move this in a privacy protective direction.
Yeah, and I just want to tag on the very end of this and because this has come up when I've been working in the belly of some of these beasts. Once you have these conversations and there's a hard decision, whether that's a budget, resource, FTE, or gear decision, I remember this one specific hilarious interaction where it was like, okay, this all makes sense to us and this is promoting the business and all that, but maybe we shouldn't pull the trigger on this because it's not legally required. Can you show me where it's legally required? And so my answer back to him was, well, sales are not legally required for a company. This is the same thing. You're going to lose revenue and harm the business without these protections in place before you launch. So don't wait until it's illegal. Wait until it's going to help your business, which is now.
Great.
I would love to, before we wrap up, I would love to get one last question from a viewer.
Well, I want to just say one. I want to say one. I just want to say one thing on the, this idea that Ann's talking about of doing a data map. You need that anyway, because it's going to help you in your big data projects. It's going to help you in building better business processes. The only thing you have to add to that question is the questions Ann's asking along the journey, which is, do I need this piece of information? Can I de-identify it? Okay, let it flow across, but put these privacy restrictions consistently across it. So, I mean, we're not asking people to completely change their processes or add new ones. We're asking them to think about privacy along the journey anyway.
Yeah, and every big data failure out there, and there are thousands of bodies along the IT road of big data, it has come down in a really fascinating way. Typically, it's data quality problems. And part of data quality is this data associated with the right customer or employee? Is this data in context and does it describe X, Y, or Z process? And that's your data quality problem. If you're solving your quality problems and you have folks already in your teams that know how to do data science and analytics and quality, you marry them together with your security and privacy team, and you can catapult yourself out of the land of COVID into the land of what's next.
Great.
All right, so here's our last question. It comes from Greg Cutsback. It says, quote, linking data between systems, as stated by James, is the subject of this question. Sharing on behalf of others is making headlines by Instagram right now. Instagram's photos are allegedly being used for facial recognition, a type of biometrics. Facebook denies these claims. I'm confused where opt-in or other privacy engineering tools could be used to improve this, assuming Facebook, Instagram, we all use data given to it, regardless of user intent. Lots going on here, more of a discussion piece. Anne, how would you respond to that?
Look, privacy as the default means that Facebook, Instagram are supposed to protect the information they have in their possession. you're right. You can't put this on the individual, but they haven't given their information to Facebook and Instagram for the whole world to make copies and distribute. There are certain expectations in terms of how this information is supposed to be protected and not picked up and copied and used by third parties. I was at a conference 2 years ago, I think, and there was the head of Facebook's privacy group, and she saw me. She said, "Oh, are you coming to my session? I'm going to give a shout out to Privacy by Design. We're doing that at Facebook now." And I was shocked, but then I said, "Thank you very much, but I'm speaking at another session." So believe it or not, Facebook, Instagram have Privacy by Design. If you figure out how to find it, because it's not obvious, that's the problem. People don't know they have it. But if you find it, you can go there and you can lock up your information very strongly and have it only shared with, 5 people, your colleagues, your friends that you choose to. So you're right that there can't be an expectation that the individual is going to know how to protect this data on Facebook or Instagram, but they are the ones who are supposed to do that for you, because that's the part of the agreement, and that's what we have to ensure is enforced.
Yeah, and I think the facial recognition issue is an important one, because it's one of these things that, oh, you put your selfies out there and, this is the most photographed generation ever, blah, blah, blah. Well, from a technical perspective, can you watermark and put a DLP stamp on your images as you put them up there? That's a technical, yes, you can. Is it hard to do right now? Yes. Is that an innovative company app like Instagram Protect as the new startup that happens tomorrow that says, hey, if you want a watermark, that's the way to go. If Facebook wants to turn the model on its head, and I'm sorry again to be repeating another brand name, but if anyone who's collecting a lot of facial data wants to share it for facial recognition research, you have to train these databases, particularly to solve for the pernicious problem of dark skin facial recognition. It is a massive, massive hole, because we haven't had diversity in the coding of how that actual machine vision and facial recognition is deployed and used. That said, these companies are making a lot of money by selling batches of data to researchers who are, for good. They are doing things for the force of good. And so, as I do with my medical data, periodically I get asked to participate in a clinical trial. They ask me, I say yes. Sometimes I'm paid for my time. Sometimes I have access to faster drugs that are being released for my particular condition. I don't see why that also can't be turned into a process where it's like, what do we want to opt in for the depth of kind of facial recognition versus, again and again and again, these are business problems. These are societal problems. These are ethical problems. But just thinking just because you can reach your hand into that cookie jar that you have the right to do it is wrong thinking, and it's not sustainable.
Agreed.
While we were speaking, I did this little really interesting Facebook quiz where I had to answer all these questions. Like I had to put in my pet's name and my favorite color. And I uploaded all these questions. And the goal of the quiz is to tell me what my sun sign is. They didn't get my sun sign right, but I did answer like 50 questions. For some reason, they needed my social security number. I don't know why, but it was a really fun quiz. Yeah, so it was great. I mean, I had a really good time.
Yeah, these age progression or put your face on a high school yearbook thing, they are trying to get your face to train databases, people. So if you don't know that, know it here, know it now.
Well, if anything's going to make you feel scared, it's what the Chinese are doing with facial recognition. Imagine, entity tapping into what Facebook has and using it for bad purposes.
Oh, what the Chinese are doing with facial recognition and social credit scores and everything else is just utterly appalling. It breaks my heart to even think about it, because where they're taking these amazing technologies, forget it. So anyone who asks you anything from China, don't give it to them.
And on that
like an episode of Black Mirror.
Yes.
What did you say, Michelle?
It's like an episode of Black Mirror.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah, the dystopia is coming.
Yes.
I want to thank the three of you. I learned a ton. It was a blast. We must speak again at some point. It was great. I will send you the link for when the video is all edited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. My pleasure.
Good to see you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye, Michelle.